What is up, my fully armed friends? Welcome back to the show. Today, this episode is a little bit different. It's something that I drove Miss Judy down to Lookout Mountain down in Chattanooga. We climbed the mountain, and we drove ourselves right into a cloud of thunder, lightning, and rain. You're gonna hear about the towards the end of this. There's a very interesting thing that goes down. But today's episode is with Daryl Heald. He was introduced to me by my friend Blaine Brooks, and I'm going to let Daryl explain to you what it is that he does for a living. But, man, he comes from a family that has a lineage that is, I mean, it basically helped build Tennessee, for sure Chattanooga. But, man, the gospel has been spread by this family, the McClellan family and the foundation, like nothing I've ever seen. So you guys are going to love this episode. And I absolutely became a great friend with this guy, Daryl Heald. He's just such a great dude. As you'll find out, I say he's given for a living. So anyways, enjoy this episode of Fully Armed. If you like what you're seeing and hearing, make sure that you share this with your friends. Subscribe, and let's get the word out. Let's continue getting the word out and getting his word out. So enjoy this. Enjoy the weather that you hear Miss Judy going through on this episode. The audio's a little bit different on this one because of that, but you're going to love it. Daryl Heald on Fully Armed. We'll see you on the backside.
Welcome to the Fully Armed Podcast with Chris Hennessee. You got your armor on?
We go pretty just straight into it. Daryl Heald, how are you today, sir?
Yeah, doing well.
I know you're doing good because we just went and had a nice lunch. And
we had a nice lunch. We're here on Lookout Mountain, and now we're back on the farm.
Just to put it into perspective, I literally have the door open for the folks who know about Miss Judy here. I got the door open, and I could see 7 states from here.
I don't know. Maybe we're on the wrong side. You can see Sand Mountain, Alabama.
That's true.
That's
pretty
our
much
view.
it. So
we got a high dollar view at Rock City.
I did not mean to start off on this foot for sure, but somebody still is going to have to explain the 7 states. I have put together 5 just on a stretch, but those last 2, I can't even.
Well, yeah, I like to enlighten me on those other 2, and I actually know the family that owns Rock City, so I will send a text to Doug Chapin, and we'll clear that up.
Doug, I need to know what all 7 of them are, and I'm sure Tennessee's included. Daryl, it's so good for you to come and join me today. We met through a mutual friend, and I've done a little bit of research about you, but if you don't care, it's just as far as like what it is that you're doing. And what I find interesting about what you do, and I don't mean to be a songwriter, but yesterday I was mowing the yard and I thought, he's giving for a living. I thought, man, this guy gives for a living. So can you kind of put into perspective what you do and what your titles are?
Yeah, thank you. Well, actually, before I was, professionally, I guess, in the philanthropy space, so technically if we think about like what I do, I work at a family foundation and actually manage, multiple foundations and trusts. Called the McClellan Foundation is what most people know it by, and we have several other entities. Yes. But prior to that, I was in commercial real estate, so I'm really a deal maker, less of a grant maker.
Now, where from originally?
Originally from Texas.
That's right. Yeah, we talked about.
I'm married a Tennessee girl, so that's why we're here.
It's kind of got that sort of Davy Crockett, like Sam Houston thing.
I kind of did a reverse, right? Because a lot of the Texans came from Tennessee.
Yes, absolutely.
And of course, fought in the Alamo and all that. Yeah, tons of history there.
Yeah, so you ended up here, and
yeah, and so started working with my father-in-law, who just passed recently, and was just a real icon, a real legend, Hugh McClellan Jr., and super privileged to work with him. He asked me to come work with him in 1997, and little did I know, it's taken me all over the world, and I've met some incredible people and been involved in God's kingdom. So,
man,
I'm very grateful that he gave me that opportunity.
Yeah, that's amazing. And we were scheduled to get together a couple weeks ago and had that information and I've done a little research on Hugh specifically, and man, what a life, what a legacy,
what a huge legacy.
Yeah.
And I think his memorial service is Saturday, and as I've just been reflecting on it, it's just even the last couple of weeks since he's passed, there are different things that have come up that I have this kind of instinct that I want to ask him.
Oh,
and
yeah.
him not being there, but I think God gives grace for the moment. But yeah, it's not easy. I think that's the loss. I mean, his heaven's game, our loss here, but he finished well. I mean, he's a good and faithful servant. He ran the race with endurance. Loved his my mother-in-law predeceased him 7 years ago with ALS, and she was an incredible, godly woman too. And he was looking forward to heaven. He knew where he was going. Looking forward to seeing Nancy and others that are there. And I just can't imagine the line of people just saying like, "This is going to be fun. Here comes Hugh."
The amount of people that he's touched, and subsequently you have as well. It'd be a pretty long line, yeah.
I think it's a pretty long line. He got involved. If you think about when I transitioned, and you said, what do you do? Professional giver. I actually saw it less about giving money and saw it more about as kingdom investing.
Yes.
And so And so I started looking when I first came to work there in 97. I went to New York and met with different people that were working on Wall Street and are professional investors. I went to Chicago and people that were trading options and commodities and things like that. And I went out to Silicon Valley on Sand Hill Road and found some believers that were, early venture capitalists and investing in tech and legendary, and really learn from them. Like, what does it mean to be an investor?
Right.
And because I think that's some of what we can get into this deeper too, that if we think we're just like giving money and it's gone, we think about it differently than if we think, let me make a smart investment here, where we are expecting a return. And so I think we don't understand it in those dimensions, and we've kind of decoupled that. And so that's why a lot of giving is just really more tipping than even giving, let alone generosity.
You've segued into something I really wanted to talk about, because I'm a history guy. I love it, especially American history. And Thomas McClellan is American history 101.
Yes.
And so to put it into perspective, from what I understood, he was born in 1837 in Scotland.
Yes.
And then he wrote a covenant, right?
Yeah. At age 20. Yeah.
And let me tell you, and of course, you know all about this. So here it's like I'm teaching the teacher. You already know, but I'm going to tell you how it hit me, right? So I looked into this, and I'm reading this covenant, right? And I'm like, this is a pretty sharp guy. Yeah. And somewhere right in the middle of it, it says at the age of 20.
Yes.
And I said, what?
Yeah, right.
I could barely write my name at 20. This guy has written a thing. It is a covenant between himself and God that says, Lord, I've lived wrong up to the ripe old age of 20, and in order to make up for that, I'm going to give you the rest of my life. And just to paraphrase it, then he's in Nova Scotia for 40 years or something like that. It was many years.
No, not that long.
Okay.
So he immigrated, to like New Brunswick, Nova Scotia area. Sorry, I don't know my Canadian geography that well.
I get it.
But then he actually then settled in the U.S. in Kansas. And so this is right after the Civil War, and started a bank.
Okay, in
Kansas,
right?
In Kansas, and it failed.
Okay,
and so then he's I want to say he's 50, early 50s at this point. So the other thing about the covenant is he actually wrote. So he started that covenant wrote it at age 20.
Which would have been 1857.
Right. And then he added to that at age 50.
Okay.
Or edited it at age 50.
Yeah.
And then his final one was age 70.
How about that?
Yeah.
Man.
And But just to show you, yeah, so it's really, really important when we think about like who we are, like as a family, and the legacy and heritage, like the power of the power of those words and that covenant, and how that has guided the family and been a real anchor for the family over the last over 140 years. So it's he was so to continue the story though, he started this bank and it failed because it was pretty tumultuous times, right? Because the country's like trying to figure out, okay, who are we now as a United States, not a divided country, and wrong timing, wrong business, wrong timing. I guess at the time, I don't know all the details, but he lost it, and so in his early 50s, which was pretty old, I think, for that time period, he heard of some opportunities, came further south, came to Chattanooga, and there were two guys that had started a new business selling disability insurance. And I think one of my friends had told me a little bit more color on the story. Like he had maybe looked at some other opportunities and was like at the train station, and someone, came to him and said, "Hey, there's this one thing you didn't see." Yeah. Went back, met these guys, and bought the business, which was a revolutionary product in the insurance industry at the time, because they were selling policies to people that you would think would be not insurable. Right. So these are coal miners, railroad workers. I mean, this is blue collar, and then so they were buying this policy, but he was saying, "I stand behind every policy. I will pay every claim." Yeah. Every legitimate claim, which is what he did, and he built that business and took it public in 1910, and on the New York Stock Exchange. So we have some of the original stock certificates from that hanging in our house, and then I can go on from there. But one of the things I always like to loop back to with Thomas as part of his to know the type of man he was and his character. Not only was he, someone that just kept going and then, created a, multi-billion-dollar business, eventually is what it grew into as his, sons and grandsons and great-grandsons took it. Yeah. To whole new levels. But the, one of the parts of the story that I really love is that as he, created some wealth and had the ability, he actually paid back all of his shareholders from that failed bank. Oh, wow. Yeah. How many years later? I don't know. I don't know the time frame on that. How about that? Maybe you've been in some deals. I have too, but I wish, I'd gotten paid back from some. But, yeah, I get it. But like he didn't have to, but he did. That's the type of, like, you can see in someone's actions, right? I mean, it's one thing to say something. It's another, like, wow, that was real money, I'm sure. Right. Because he was, what he had to do that, but he just felt like, I'm going to do that. Yeah. How about that? And I tell you, I read through the covenant. I didn't realize that it was in different, ages and different sections like that. But I've also seen that in his life, obviously he did big things, but it scratched the surface to what was coming in the next 100 years, what he actually laid eyes on, right? So I found that the last paragraph in that covenant was very interesting, and it meant a lot to me, so I'll read it. And it says, "And if this should fall into the hands of any of my friends," and I assume family, "when I am in the dust," I thought that was pretty cool, "may they make the engagement their own, and do thou graciously admit them to," and he's talking to the Lord in this, right? Because it's a covenant, "to partake in all the blessings of thy covenant through Jesus, the great mediator of it," And it goes on to basically say, let's keep this baby going, and proof's in the pudding that it most certainly did that, right? It has, yeah. So we're now active now, 6th generation. So my oldest daughter and our oldest nephew came on the foundation board 2 years ago. Wow. As 6th generation.
So that's just...
We have 7 generations living now, but 6th generation actively involved in kingdom work.
How about that? And driving up the mountain today, overlooking Chattanooga and thinking about his story, I was like, that's the foundation work of that city. And I love it so much. I've always been a Chattanooga fan. It just seems like it's the South. Just it encompasses everything great about the South,
It is a great community, and they were, I think, I don't know if they're still the largest employer in town, but that's the way that the McClellan, of course I didn't know them, but the Hugh McClellan Sr., I remember talking with him, and the way that the McClellans viewed the company was all the employees it was family.
Yeah.
And that's a big family. I mean, I think when I came there's, 2,000 or 3,000 employees. So they really saw that. I mean, in one sense, their first stewardship was to their family and that company. And then the impact in their, and then it just kind of reverberates out from Chattanooga local to, Tennessee regional, national. And then we can get to at some point, my father-in-law, Hugh Jr., Hugh O, as most people call him, Hugh, is the one that really took it global.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing, man. So we've talked a lot about, and you're talking about generations. And speaking of generations, you have quite a few generations living under your roof.
Well, I mean, not too many generations, but we have quite a few.
Well, you've got one large group of one generation living under there, and you actually introduced me to a show that you did, and I learned a lot about you and your family through that. But can you just give me the run through?
Yeah, well, yeah. So
it's so interesting.
I think, a lot of times here, I know you probably have a wide listening base here, but like in the South, a lot of people say, "Well, how are the kids doing?"
Yeah.
And what Chris is alluding to is we have 9 kids, 9 children, 5 biological and 4 adopted, which is part of our journey of generosity and what God's been teaching us and opportunities He's put in front of us. And so, I always think when people say, "How's the family? How are the kids?" It's like you can also give this the nice courteous answer. We're great.
Yeah.
Or
do we want to start at this one and work our way down?
This could take a while.
Yeah.
This could take a while, and all. But as one of there's another family that or other families we've been connected with that also have been on this adoption journey, and one in particular that we know, they've adopted 13 special needs kids.
Wow.
And one of the things is I was kind of struggling with this on the early, on the kind of the front side of this, and just thinking, okay, trying to get my head around it. I remember talking with him, and he said, he says, "Daryl," he said, "I know that you're probably thinking this. People are also maybe adding their 2 cents into this whole thing too." But he said, that you might have heard, even yourself or other people saying this, like, "Hey, that's pretty crazy." And I said, "Yeah, I have." He goes, "But just remember this: it's a good crazy."
It's a good crazy. It really is. And of course, if we went into all of the stories, we would be here for quite a while because there's some really interesting stories. But some of the children that you guys have adopted, their special needs, and that's been, so is that, I imagine from what I understand, that's a blessing in your own right?
It is. It's been a huge blessing. I think the other thing I learned from another family, I love it the way she said this, is that sometimes, when, like, if you just see us walking through the airport and I can look kind of funny we got prosthetics and wheelchairs and all, everything going, and and people were staring because we don't look like the my wife. So right now, like, the only ones we have at home are our 4 Chinese children.
Yeah. And
so here are my wife and I, one from Texas, Tennessee, and then we got 4 Chinese kids, 18 to 12 now.
Oh wow.
And so they're and they're looking at this, and they're I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Hey, listen, I'll break the ice here because here, Miss Judy anything goes. So we got all kinds of technology going on. It's a live show. I've had interviews where the door has come open and somebody been like, "Hey, what y'all doing in there?" I'm like, "Well, come on in." And I hear my phone buzz, and I got it up here busy putting all the cameras and stuff up. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I left my phone up there." But yeah, so you're walking through the airport.
I remember my train of thought. And so I think well, I know when people look at that, we get this kind of look of like, well, that's, like people are like, well, that's, that's great that y'all have done this. And I think and it looks very one-sided. But the thing that I've learned and truly when you understand the biblical message of generosity, it's always, it's always both and. Like it's both giving and receiving. And the way one of the ladies that we know says is like, it might look like it, but I didn't rescue these kids; they rescued me.
Yeah, how about that, man? That is just.
And I think for me, I'm like I'm not sure I would like to know the version of Daryl without these four.
That's good,
really,
yeah.
and just where, yeah, I've for sure been the biggest recipient.
Do you mind telling me this story? So I heard this, and I'm going to ask you to tell it again because I laughed for a while about this, but. And if you don't want to, it's fine.
Sure.
We'll edit this out. But you and your son are skiing. I think it's son.
Yeah.
Please tell that story.
Okay. Well, yeah. So one of the things we just learned to do with all of our kids is, we just go and we try different things and all. And so like my wife loves to ski and all the other kids ski and snowboard and we did that with our the older kids, and so we just started taking our adopted kids as well. Well, our youngest son Charlie has double prosthetic, so we had to do when we adopted him at age 4, I guess maybe 4 or 5 months later, we had to do a double amputation because he really had no growth below either knee.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you think, well, and he's still learning English. Like, how do you explain to your son what's going to happen here? Right. I mean, that's not easy, first of all. But so we get through that. We're out skiing, and but he wants to snowboard. Like he's seen all these crazy things, and his older brother snowboard.
Yeah. How old would he be at this point?
He's 5.
Okay.
So he's 5 years old, and I mean he's just tiny. Well, they kind of figured out that we just instead of using his prosthetics, we just put him straight in the boots.
Yeah.
Kind of from his knees, and so here we are going up the chair lift, and there's some amazing programs like in Breckenridge we see there in Park Cities where they have these adaptive skiing and snowboard programs, and so with instructors and a volunteer. So the 4 of us are on this chairlift going up, and they're like, "Charlie, nice to meet you," and we're just doing these introductions, and he says, hi to them, and they're like, "Where are you from?" He goes, "I'm from China," and they're like, "Oh, that's great." And he goes, "Yeah, my dad came, my mom and dad came to get me from China. They bring me home and they cut my legs off." And then he just he says that to him, and then he just turns and he just holds it straight on. And they're the two of them are kind of looking at me and going like, that is what happened.
Yeah, that's what happened.
That is what happened. I'm not, I don't. That's, he could have maybe laid that out in a little,
Man, that personality off the bat, man, I'm like, that's great.
So that's what it is. Just tell it like it is.
Tell it like
that's
it is.
Charlie.
That's great. How old is he now?
He's 12 now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Now he's really into golf.
Oh, good. That's great.
Yeah, we got some funny stories there too, because he's 6th grade, made the 6th grade golf team.
Oh, that's great.
And but he also has some limb differential, not only his legs but his hands, and he has no radius here, so he actually swings it like a slap shot in hockey.
Okay.
But sometimes, because he doesn't have all of the digital into each one, sometimes the club it'll just go helicoptering. So the guys on the driving range up at our club, know that, and so we have to stop everything and go get his club. But he was playing in a tournament. And 7th hole, he hit a drive, and he just went out of his hands. But instead of like going out, it went straight up, and it went like 30 feet up in the air, and it got stuck in a tree.
In a tree.
Yeah. Luckily, there were some small trees, and he has he's got a big. His golf coach is a big guy.
Yeah.
He goes, "I'll get that thing down." Went over there, shook that thing down, and
Wow.
and all. And then the other day, he, Charlie has little to no fear, and he's got also his running blades too, and so he just was, he just constantly goes, and he's just like a little boy. He's just like in motion, high speed, falls all the time, but super tough. Well, we're just used to that, and so, but he's in this golf tournament, and he's got his walking legs on, and he's got golf shoes on him, and he's teeing off again, or before he could tee off, he just collapsed. And so sometimes if you don't, the way you have to like keep tension on some of the legs, if it just gets out of whack, it almost collapses, almost like the Tin Man.
Right.
It just, and it's just, but I've seen it 1,000 times. I don't move. I'm sitting there. And of course, all the parents who don't know this, they're like, they're like, whoa, like everyone's kind of going to, maybe try it out, but they all look at me. I hadn't moved. And of course, then I get this look like, well, what's wrong with, but they just don't know this. But so it looks like I'm, the dad who doesn't care. But then I looked, because he hadn't gotten up as quick as he typically would. And I realized, oh my goodness, his foot came off. And so, like, it attaches, like, there's 4 screws to his foot. The way, these super high-tech kind of prosthetic legs. Well, his foot had come off. And so they're like, okay, I have to go over there and help him now, right? Because, he can't stand without that. So I start walking over there, and I get this. I get the stiff arm.
I got it, Dad.
No, nothing. He goes, I got this. He's on his knees. And he just cracks at 150 yards straight down the fairway.
Off his knees.
Off his knees. I'll show you the video, because I didn't get it there, because I was like, what is he doing? Because I was just standing there, and he hits this whole thing, and everyone's like, what did he just do? And then he's like, then he goes, okay, now you can, help me get my foot back on. Yeah, so it was.
That's kind of a mic drop moment right there. It's like, what's this?
Well, one of the coaches came over to me because they were playing 2 other groups or something. One of the coaches came over, and he goes, I have no words, Dad. I have just no words for that.
That is inspirational right there, man.
Yeah, he just goes for it. So.
That's great. I can't even. I bet you got thousands of stories, and of course we do have time. We could do it, but I do have something I want to ask you or talk to you about. So our mutual friend Blaine Brooks introduced us, and I called you, cold called, and you were so kind, to talk to me. This guy you never met, and we have a great conversation for 20 minutes. And man, you said something even just in that conversation, because we're talking about what you do, and then we're talking about giving in general, and you said you took it's better to give than to receive to a whole different level for me, and I'd love for you to sort of reiterate that, or what the way you explained it, because it's so obvious to us. It's better to give than to receive, but then you sort of spun it a little different way to me. So I'd love to see if you could.
Yeah, and maybe it's a little of the context. I was, as I mentioned before, I'd been in commercial real estate, and I'd been raised in the church, understood tithing because I was from Texas, good Southern Baptist boy, and I understood the tithe, but I also understood, as a young real estate guy, what's a good deal. And if you're going to give me 90% of a deal, and I only expect 10, I'm like, all right, let's do that. Let's do that deal, Chris. Right.
Yeah. Right.
And so that's how bad, like I had, unfortunately did not understand the biblical message of generosity.
Right.
Because I thought that was the deal.
Yeah.
And, and until, God's been patient with me to help reveal this to me. Well, so on this whole journey.
Now, hold on. Let me stop you just a minute. because I've struggled with this for years. But when you say, I want to make sure people listen and understand, when you say it's a deal, like, who's it a deal for?
Well, no, I'm saying I thought that was the deal. Like, these are the deal, the deal terms.
Yeah.
God says, hey, look, I only want 10%.
Right.
If you'll just tithe to me, I'm okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I understood the deal to be.
Right. Okay. I want to make
and
sure
I dramatically missed it.
Right.
So my whole point is like, I so missed this.
Right.
Right. Because, and I guess I'll just start here, is where, like, so I was really much more of a, like, I describe myself as a giver, as a maker and a taker. Mm-hmm. And then happy to, in one sense, just kind of tithe or tip was what I call it.
Yeah.
Like, it just wasn't even, like, my heart wasn't in it. And I thought it was just all financial. I thought it was,
it's what you're supposed to do, so you do it.
Right. And to make sure I'm right with God and things like that. And so I thought it was just a box to check versus really trying to understand this. But this is the part of the journey where God has me, where it was then less about, like, when I started, like, if we think about this, we have people doing ministry, we have people with money, and that, they're always trying to meet, right? So you get this whole fundraising thing, and the church, the tithe, and then other ministries asking, and all. Now the cool thing is where, so one, we have to understand that, which I didn't understand, right?
Yeah.
I thought that 90% was mine.
Right.
If I did if I was willing to give the 10.
Yeah.
So we first have to, truly understand stewardship and like who owns it, right? Because a steward is not the owner. God is the owner. And so when we, begin to understand that, then we kind of move on from there to where when you look at this value proposition that Jesus puts out there, that it's more blessed to give than receive. Mm-hmm. And really, is like,
I hear you.
Wow. So then what is that then? Why is it more blessed to give than receive? Because actually it feels good to get a bunch of stuff. Mm-hmm. Right. But if we really think about it, when we've been able to, like, give our kids or give our wives or our friends, something that really meant something to them, and that's the joy.
Yeah.
Right. that Jesus is calling us into, of this whole blessedness. Right. And this blessedness too is understood, like Tim Keller's said in some of the teaching, like, where we think, oh, that's just a word, but like in the Jewish sense, this blessedness, this is when all those things that Isaiah talks about, and to, like, this is where all those things begin to happen.
Yeah. Man. And
that's that's the big flip, is where it really is opportunity, because what inures to us, meaning, like, what's to our benefit, when we're willing to release the things that seem temporal and right in front of us, and the things that we can touch and own, versus the things which we invest in that are eternal, that we can't see. And that's where, like, God says, you're willing to do that when the whole world, right? Because in the opposite side, so Jesus has this still small voice, simple value proposition, more blessed to give than receive. The world just, like, screams, like, and you might even know this more than I do. I mean, I think it's thousands of imprints, right? All the social media, everything else that we see is always selling us every day.
Yeah.
Bigger, better, faster,
stronger.
More.
Yeah, that's right.
Bigger, better, faster, more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so it's like, it's almost like, so those are the competing worldviews: more blessed to give than receive, bigger, better, faster, more. So one's screaming over here. And so, one of the questions to ask, I'm asking myself, who am I listening to?
Yeah.
Right. And it seems like, this is real. It's right in front of us. But when we're willing to believe this, and that's why it actually has to be driven to belief, not knowledge, because all of us know that. Most people in some type of church setting, if I start the verse out, can finish the verse. It's, Jesus said, it's more blessed to
give than receive.
Right. Most people can
give than receive.
Right. Most people can. So it's not a knowledge. Knowledge doesn't change. It's belief that does. And belief lies at the heart, not in the head.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the other thing is, as I understood, I think it was Dallas Ward that said, none of us act on unbelief. We only act on belief.
Right.
So, if I start looking at what you do, I can start mapping your belief system.
Interesting. Like,
and now, but the other interesting thing is where I've been involved globally. One of the things that has been fascinating to me is just understanding and seeing different cultures. But the interesting thing is what we might think we have as personal beliefs are actually more cultural belief.
I get that.
So like I'm from Texas, and I'm gonna smoke meat, low and slow. What am I gonna put on there?
Well, you're going to put on something to keep it moist for one, right? But
but what type of meat am I gonna choose?
Oh, you're going to do brisket, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you're from Tennessee.
Yeah.
And you're going to do something low and slow. What are you going to put
Probably
on?
put pork on there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's a cult, right? We're going to, I think, well, no, that's what I like. Well, but that's what I grew up with.
That's it, right.
And so, so is that my personal belief or is that a cultural belief? And so most of what we have, we have a cultural belief in church. We have a, cultural belief in our community, in our country, right? And you begin to really see the power of culture. And of course, Peter Drucker said this, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? We don't, how powerful culture is. And that's where I'm saying is why it's important to have personal belief, why it's important to be on this journey that we call, this journey of truly understanding God's promises on anything, not just generosity piece.
Yeah. The thing that really hits me is that, what did you say? It wasn't, you had the, not opportunity to give, but the, rather than to think of giving as
obligation. Because if I said to you, hey, Chris, great to meet you. I got 3 things I need you to do. You'd be like, okay. Yeah. You're automatically you might have been moving. You've been very open towards me before.
Right.
But you have moved to neutral or defensive at this point.
Right.
Where is this going? I don't know. Because it's almost like triggers us, right? If I'm like, I have 3 things I need you to do for me. Wow. But if I said, Chris, great to meet you. I just finished a meeting with Warren Buffett, and he's got this deal, that he wants, that he was letting me look at, and
he needs one.
I got a little, I get a little margin. He's interested in hearing about it. Yeah. Be like, yes, yes, 100%, yes. So if it's a kind of a free look opportunity, we move towards that.
Yeah.
Then what we have to do, though, doesn't mean that everything presented to us that we have to act on, but that's the discernment decision that we do that in prayer with the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is and I learned this too from another mentor of mine is he thanked everyone that asked him for money.
Because he got the opportunity
because he said, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah. It doesn't mean that he's obligated. But he thanked him for the opportunity. And I said, why do you do that? Because he's like, everyone is asking for money. And he said, because there was a time that you didn't know me when I didn't have any of this. No one asked me for money. It was like, it's actually a privilege to steward. That? God has given me money to steward, and I'm thankful for it.
Yeah.
Because if you really think it's about investing in the kingdom and it's not about just this person representing ministry, and you really can see it kind of from the macro side, then, be grateful that I actually, God's given me, stewardship of some of his resources to invest. Because what is, because it's, I always love this, what Paul said, because sometimes we can get really uncomfortable in the whole fundraising, asking and all this stuff, right? One of the greatest things I love about Paul in his ministry, and he was talking to the Philippian church in chapter 4, and he said, look, there are a lot of people that might have said a bunch of stuff and everything else like that, but pretty much y'all came through, that it would count to you for eternity. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, like, so for example, where my friend got it right, he was thankful for that, because if we really do believe that this isn't, we're not, these things really don't count in the temporal side. What really counts is the eternal side.
That's the kingdom, then.
Right. And so, so what would inure to you there? Because if we're not looking for, if we don't have these opportunities coming to us, and we're not looking for these opportunities, and all we're doing is just laying up treasure here on earth.
Well, we know where that leads.
Right. Where does that lead?
So,
like how risky is that?
What I hope, obviously I hope people take a lot from this conversation, but man, that's what you said on the phone. And you paraphrase this, this is the better version because I got the full details, but it hit me so hard because I think so many of us look at giving as an obligation. He asked us for 10% and, I'm going to hold on to this so hard because I worked so hard to get it. And what if I lose, but I'm going to give it because he said to, and trust. And man, to change that obligation into opportunity that's a goal of mine. I'm telling you, to look, and here's a way for me to put it into a very real life perspective. Mm. You have a friend who has had something happen at their house, and I'm handy, so I can go help at your house or cut a tree or whatever it might be. And I've got to a place in life, and I hope that my kids can get there where I hear about it and I'm like, yeah, I can do this. Mm-hmm. And so on the most low level, right? The drive home after having done that thing, that's when you realize that was an opportunity to go do a thing, not an obligation. I don't feel like I have to go do it. And that is, to me, that's the spirit. That's the spirit of the thing we're talking about right there.
Yeah, it's a get to, not a have to.
Yeah, man.
And when we start, and so that's what we, right, that's what God's asking us to, Jesus is asking, bringing us into this whole blessedness. Like, move into that and begin to exercise that. And the best way to do it is just to start giving. And a lot of people get hung up. Well, what if that's not the right thing? What if they don't use it right? And stuff like that. Well, guess what? That's on them, not on you.
Yeah.
Right. So you still have to, you need to move in the spirit, and you can use both your heart and your mind, right? We should be moved in relationship, in emotion, as well as strategy. So actually you need to incorporate all three, right? It's not just about emotion, whatever made me cry or whatever, tug my heartstrings. It's really discerning, say, all three of those. It's like, so God will believe in God's sovereignty. He'll always put different people in our paths, and we have to see those things as not by accident. Right. Now, it also doesn't mean it's an obligation, because and there are things that will, at different times we're going to be really moved by. And I told you I'd listened to one of your episodes, and Isaiah.
Yeah, Rhonda Paulson.
Rhonda Paulson. Yeah. Rhonda, I'm a fan.
Isaiah 117 house.
Isaiah 117 house.
Yeah.
Really love that. And you think, wow, that really, hearing that story and those stories of all those kids, like, really moved me. Mm-hmm. And so then we have to discern, like, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do with that?
Right. Yeah.
What do you want me to do? Now, it could just be prayer.
Right.
It could be giving time, or it could be, also writing a check. It could be all three. Mm-hmm. And some of that can just be seasonal as well, right? I mean, just like we recognize seasons where this has happened. I mean, I think we're, in our story, you probably heard this, where, I mean, if you had asked us when we had 4 kids or 5 kids, hey, have we all ever thought about adoption? No, 0.
You got 4 or 5 kids.
Yeah, like we had 0 thought of that, but when our two, be careful. Yeah, it's like, but when our 2 older daughters, Frances and Hallie's, just said, hey, Dad, we really think if we're going to be Matthew 6:33, if we're going to be seeking the kingdom as a family, we really feel like there's a new way for us to do that. And they had traveled with me quite a bit globally, and loved playing with kids and loved holding babies and all these different things. But as they got a little older, 13, 14, they really discerned that God had a different thing for us. And what I thought was a good number at 5, God had a better number at 9.
How about that, man? Wow. And there's 9. I mean, well, I guess you're just going to see what happens next, right?
Well, right. So what I've learned by that, yeah. So, I mean, as we, because we did them all separately. And of course I had, people ask me like, well, I mean, like, where does it stop? Or like, how do you know? And all these other things. And I think what God gave me real insight from the first one is what I really had to learn in that first one was, it was super hard for me. I was not an easy sell. In fact, truth be told, I kind of blocked the whole adoption thing because I was scared.
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot adoption thing because I was scared.
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of different reasons. Can I love one that's, not my own?
I get it, yeah.
Hey, we got a lot going on. I mean, like, talking about the crazy thing, right? And like wanting order or, less chaos, right? I mean, I'm trying to de-risk a lot of these things. And then of course I'm thinking, empty nest. That's gonna, now all of a sudden I've gone back another 5 years. It's,
Yeah,
I was thinking like, lower handicap and all these other things.
Yeah, right.
And but ultimately what God really showed me is in James 1, he said, every good and perfect gift comes down from the Heavenly Father of lights. Is that, the only way I can say this is I was unwilling to receive a good and perfect gift.
How about that?
Yeah. And so, because I wanted him to de-risk it. I wanted to know, just totally de-risk it. Give me assurances ahead of time. And that's not how it works. That's not how faith works.
Yeah.
Because if he's calling us to something, we have to step out in faith. And you've always heard the term, he'll always provide, grace for the moment. I wanted it beforehand. He gives it in the moment that it's needed.
Yeah.
I didn't need it ahead of time. I needed it when the decision was there. And I've understood grace at so many more dimensions than I ever would had we not done that. And so that's where, so the question is, hey, well, where does this stop? How many more? I'm like, I'm not afraid anymore to receive a good and perfect gift. So however many, if that would have been 15, we were fine with that too.
Isn't it interesting how the world will teach us to believe this way, when in fact our body, our yearning wants to be taught by God to believe basically just about 180 degree opposite of what the culture's trying to teach us. Right. It's amazing. It really is. It's so interesting. So one of the things we get caught up in numbers, right? And so as I was reading, getting some information in the last week or so, I was like, man, the numbers are staggering. How much has been given over the last, 100 years or, through this foundation. But even in this conversation with you, it's like, man, it doesn't matter. We get so caught up in dollar, numbers and figures and how many people this and that. It's like, no, it's kingdom, right? It's so interesting.
And sometimes it's just one child, right? And, or one church, or it's, I think, again, at different times, God could have us in some very small, intimate, decisions and contexts. And then other times he can have us in the opposite of that, where it really is. And this is where, I go back to my father-in-law. I think just, what I saw him do over 30 years of working with him and traveling with him was his instinct his instinct to see different men and women, hear their vision, and then that instinct to just go right there with them, and provide, and what God had put him in this family to steward these financial resources, in a macro way, and he did that really well. I can regale you with like just once it's winter after winter after winter, right? If he's I think about it like kind of like a Kingdom VC, he just funded all these unicorns.
It's unbelievable.
And that's what I'm saying is I think it would be really, I think his homegoing and what he's experiencing right now, I mean, it will take eternity for all these people to kind of tell him hey, we didn't know each other, but this is what happened, because he really was funding things at many things at global levels. I mean, in 100 plus countries, and I mean, really in the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions, and it's pretty astonishing.
People, it's not money, it's people.
Yeah. And he was, if I can go back a little bit, just because I think it was very interesting too, where as the foundations were growing and being built, Leighton Ford, who was Billy Graham's brother-in-law, invited him to a Lausanne Congress back in the late 70s, and that's where he got exposure, seeing these different, I mean, really his exposure to kind of global missions before was all just, kind of Western missions who were, we're here, and we go to the world. What he encountered, he met so many different leaders from all over the world, Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, that obviously talked a different language, didn't look like us, and all these other things. And he was really very, very early on as a Western grant maker doing direct gifts to, indigenous leaders. Yeah, that were just like right there, not through any Western mission organization. And when I started working there in 97, it was, well over 60% of what our giving was going to outside the U.S.
Yeah.
And which is very unusual, because even to this day, there's, Giving USA tracks all this. There's, say, $500 billion given in cash last year. But traditionally, this number very rarely changed. 10% of that, only 10% of that goes outside the U.S. So everything given in the U.S., 90% stays in the U.S.
Wow.
Because we all have a tendency to just give to the things we know, the people we, things we like, people we know,
right.
And we also have a tendency to give to people like ourselves.
Well, you're comfortable.
So so for an American to give into India or into China or into Bangladesh or into Kazakhstan, very unusual.
Yeah.
And that's true literally for most cultures. Is that, Germans primarily give to Germans. And so, but if we're, I think in some ways, again, on our journey, and most of us give, like in these, talk about these concentric circles where and it typically has to start this way, because I mean, if we don't have the opportunities,
I get that.
Yeah. It starts with, who we know and what we care about, and and that typically is fairly localized or regional.
Yeah.
But if God's increasing some of that stewardship, then the opportunities, that geography continues to expand. So if we think about, Jerusalem, Judea, and
Oh, right.
Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth,
Yeah.
my father-in-law was very early on as a U.S. Foundation and grant maker to the uttermost parts of the earth. And when I first came there too, it's like my wife is like, "Why are you going to these places?" Like, oh, well, I think they sent me to all these places they didn't want to go. Right? I mean, Siberia and Sudan,
Right.
and Cuba and Central Asia, and just all these places. And I guess I was crazy enough to go, but I loved it, and I loved seeing. Like if we think about our family, right? This is all family, right? If we're all in Christ,
that's it.
We're
the
brothers
church,
and sisters
right?
in Christ. The church, but for me to see, the church, was not just, Southern Baptist and Texas, flavored. That like I've seen the church in over 100 languages.
Yeah,
and,
how about that?
It's spectacular. It's like I can't imagine. I mean, just it would be really stunning in heaven, right? Every tribe, every nation represented. It's going to be quite amazing.
It's so inspiring, man. Not everything, all the stuff. I gotta say, this is so cool. I gotta say, the only thing I'm concerned about is that one of these is going to shut all the power off, and then we're done. But we're about to get rained on, and but this is awesome. Just so you guys know, I might take a picture, but the door's open and there's lightning bolts hitting all around us. It's starting to rain. It's thundering. I hope you can hear it through the. So I'll close off with this because I've taken so much from this, especially the opportunity to give as opposed to the obligation. I think that's such a big deal. But man, again, being such a fan of history, and I feel like that I can take a lot from this, and I think a lot of people can. Thomas McClellan, 1837, right? So we're talking about many, many, many years ago. Set into course something that we're talking about in 2025. Yeah. How many lives, how much of a kingdom has been expanded because of that? And he didn't necessarily see it, but he made such a strict covenant, and he, just from what I can tell, and the name carried on, and the kingdom is expanded from it, and it's fixing to get loud and rainy in here. But man, we don't know what it is that we're doing today. That's right. Not to put it into hundreds of years of a scope, but just in today that might lead to something that works for somebody tomorrow or the next day, whether it's our children or the children's children. There it is.
Wow, that rocked the whole thing.
Wow.
Woo!
We hear you.
Okay.
We hear you. And I'm going to get away from this gear. I'm glad we're sitting on. Thank you, Judy, for having tires. I think we better shut it off.
Okay.
But that, and we got that on camera too. Both of our faces will be on camera right there. That struck that
was pretty close.
The RV. We're going to call it.
Okay.
But Daryl, thank you so much, man. What a blessing. And, I would love to talk to you again and dig even deeper into this stuff. But thank you for taking the time to join us on Fully Armed.
Well,
really
thanks, Chris. I always appreciate the opportunity, right? I mean, this is the testimony, and I realize that really, I'm standing on the shoulders of faithful men, and I think this is what this is God's covenant. Like He said, to the righteous, He will visit multiple generations, right? And so that's. I've always felt that we have these portraits of these different McClellan family members from different generations, and I've always felt like that whole sense of the power of that and God's promise through those men, which then also has encouraged me, and hopefully that's what we've been teaching our kids, 6th generation, and my grandkids now 7 generations, and we'll see how long the Lord gives grace for that.
It's amazing.
I appreciate your heart and vision, getting to know you and what you're doing. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, you took a chance on us today. So thanks for giving me. You gave me half your day and almost got struck by lightning. Actually, I realized why it was so loud and so close. It's because we're in the clouds.
We are.
So we didn't have far to go to get
that is true.
Thanks again, Daryl. I appreciate you very much. And folks, until we see you again, get out your Bible, put on your armor. God bless you. All right, guys. Thanks for checking out the show. Thanks for understanding that this is an RV and that the weather most certainly shows up. Mother Nature joins us on this one, I guess you'd say. But listen, till next time, make sure that you get out your Bible, put on your armor, and God bless you. We'll see you next time on Fully Armed.